My name is John, and this paranormal story happened to my wife Emily and me in 2009. Everything took place in a low-budget hotel in Europe. We had been married for only a few months and decided to go on our honeymoon to Europe for 2 weeks in the winter. The entire trip was incredible, but when we went to the airport to take our flight back to the United States, we were told that the flights were canceled because a snowstorm was approaching. They said our flight would likely be delayed until after the storm passed, which would be approximately in 2 days. We didn't know what to do because we didn't have much money left. We had budgeted just for the 2 weeks we would stay there, so we had to look for a very cheap hotel. In the end, we found one very close to the center of the city. Yes, it looked very neglected, but above all, it looked very old. It was a very old Colonial hotel, but it was the most we could afford. We rented a room for those 2 nights and went up to the 3rd floor where our room was, and we settled in. But from the first moment we entered, Emily told me that she didn't feel well. She said her mood had changed out of nowhere, and she felt very strange, with an inexplicable anguish. I told her that we could go out for a while to distract ourselves and not spend so much time in that place because, to be honest, it wasn't as nice as the hotels where we had stayed the previous days. I thought that was the reason why Emily was so distressed or whatever she said she felt, but she didn't want to go out because it was too cold, and she said she didn't feel like doing anything. That whole day we spent in the room watching TV and lying down, resting. We were quite tired from the whole trip. Emily fell asleep around 8 at night. Meanwhile, I decided to leave the hotel to look for an open cafeteria to buy some food and coffee for the 2 of us because obviously in that hotel they didn't sell food, much less have a restaurant. I decided not to wake up Emily and leave without telling her, which I now know was a mistake on my part. It didn't take me too long to find a coffee shop because there they are the most common on every corner. I went into the first one I saw and bought some sandwiches and coffee to go. It didn't take long, maybe 20 minutes, but when I entered the room, Emily got very scared and had an inexplicable terror on her face. The fright was so much that she screamed very loud, scaring me too. She jumped out of bed and pulled off all the covers, desperately looking for something, with her eyes full of fear. I asked her, upset, what was wrong, and she answered me with a face of terror and almost in tears. There was something here in bed with me. It was lying next to me, caressing my arm, and it was moving. I was half asleep and didn't say anything because I thought it was you. I was so confused. I peeked under the bed to see if there was someone, although I knew that no one could have entered the room because, obviously, I had left it locked before I left. But there was no one else in it or in the bathroom. In my confusion, I asked Emily if she wasn't dreaming, or perhaps could have confused dreams with reality, and by how she saw me enter suddenly, she freaked out. Well, I wanted to find an explanation and calm her down above all, but she kept telling me no, that it hadn't been a dream, that it had really happened. And when she saw that I was coming through the door, she felt incredibly scared, and that's why she jumped out of bed and reacted like that. I didn't know what else to say or what else to do. Of course, I believed her because she's my wife and I trust her. I had never lied about things like that. In fact, she had never believed in those things, nor was she a fan of watching horror movies or anything like that. She didn't have the need to lie, and besides that, I could see the fear in her face. I know her perfectly. I asked her if she wanted to change to another hotel, but she calmed down and told me no, that she was calmer and that I shouldn't worry anymore. Besides, we didn't have money to pay for another hotel because we had already spent the rest on that hotel for 2 nights. We both had dinner, but the truth is that we don't know anything about the food because of that bitter experience we had gone through. I felt very bad seeing Emily's discomfort. She looked very strange at that moment, and I could see that she did not feel well. We finished dinner, and she told me that we should go to sleep because she did not want to wake up anymore. We fell asleep deeply, but in the early morning, I felt that Emily was moving me so that I would wake up. She only moved me without saying anything. I asked her what was happening, and she answered me in a whisper, "Turn to face where the armchair is." This is where the most murky and terrifying part of this whole story comes in. There was an armchair in front of the bed, in the corner of the room, and there sat a very old woman with a very disturbing appearance, watching us sleep. The time my wife asked me in a very low voice while trembling, "Do you see her?" I answered, yes. We both held hands very tightly. I felt my wife shaking in an impressive way. I wanted to get out of bed to turn on the light and see who that woman was, but my wife pulled me so that I would not. I got up because I was afraid that something would happen to me. They were the longest minutes of our entire lives. Imagine being in that situation, being in bed, watching an old woman with a horrible appearance sitting in front of you in the shadows, watching you sleep at the same time that you feel how the atmosphere becomes more and more tense and desperate. I did not know what to do except for myself. I was afraid for my wife because I knew that what we were seeing was not a person who was in this plane. Very slowly, I covered my wife's face with the sheet and then I also covered her. At this point, I was already crying but without making noise. I decided to uncover my face, and I saw that that old woman was no longer in the chair, and that was when I jumped out of bed and turned on the light. I told my wife that there was no one there anymore. Upon hearing that, she uncovered her face and began to cry uncontrollably. I just hugged her and told her to pack her things, that we would go to another hotel, regardless of whether we had paid for the 2 nights there. She immediately began to pack without hesitating for a second and without stopping. We started to cry because I swear that seeing that left us with a nervous shock for a long time. We went down to reception and I told the young man who was there at that moment what had happened because I wanted to see if somehow we could get our money back for the next night, which in the end was no longer possible. But he apologized and was very empathetic with us, telling us the same thing, that it would be better if we went to another hotel because in that place, many things happened for normal people. That is why the guests did not last long at the hotel. I could not help but ask him why, but with the little English he spoke, the young man only told us that in the 40s, that place was an apartment complex and that many Jews lived there, and most of them were deprived of life in that place in their own apartments, obviously by the Germans. That was a lot for both me and my wife. We immediately left the place, and she told me that it was as if she had taken a breath of fresh air the first second she left there, that her anguish had completely disappeared when she stepped on the street. The reality of what happened to her and what had Sid distressed was having entered that place, which from what we could find out in the past, very atrocious and inhuman things happened there. It is obvious that it has that vibe, and that many people simply by setting foot inside that place feel very bad immediately. We do not know if that lady who appeared to us while we were sleeping was a Jew who, unfortunately, the Germans took her life while she was in her apartment. Although it must be most likely, we really do not wish anyone to live an experience of this level. I cannot understand how we did not have a heart attack when we saw this presence. Always investigate well the places where you are going to stay, especially in the past. Sometimes cheap can be very expensive. If you're enjoying the video, please subscribe the channel for future videos, and like and share with your friends. My name is Maria, and I am writing to you from Colorado. I want to share this anecdote that happened to me and my boyfriend while we were on vacation, staying in a hotel in Florida. My boyfriend was given vacation from work in October, so we decided to go to the beach because where we live it was already quite cold. I was looking for cheap hotels, but that were nice at the same time. Obviously, we did not stay in any that were in front of the sea because those were very expensive. In my search, I found a small hotel that looked very nice and even had a pool. The hotel was not in front of the beach, but it was a few blocks from it, so it seemed like a very good option, especially for the price. We arrived that morning to stay, and everything was very good. The hotel was the same as in the photos, very clean and comfortable. But what I did not like at first was that our room was on the first floor, that is, on the ground floor, and our window faced the pool. My fear was that we would not be able to rest because of the noise outside. Later, I read that the pool closed at 7 in the evening. After that time, no one could be out there in the pool. We settled in, and then we went to the beach for the rest of the day until at night when we returned to our room. I don't remember the exact time, but it was already after 11 because we were late at a bar having some drinks. The window curtains were open, and the first thing I noticed when I looked out was an elderly gentleman who was lying in one of the beach chairs with a book covering his face. The gentleman was there alone outside reading, which seemed strange to me. According to this, the doors to the pool closed at 7 in the evening, but without giving it any more thought, I closed the curtains, and we lay down to sleep because we were both very tired. The next day, we were in the pool in the morning with more people who were also staying at the hotel. After that, we went to the beach and a shopping center and returned to the hotel around 7:30 in the evening. My boyfriend asked me if we were going out to dinner or if I preferred to order something to the room, and since I was really very tired, I told him it was better. I saw that gentleman lying in the same chair, reading the same book that covered his face. I told him, emphasizing that it seemed very strange to me that someone was in the pool at that time. Well, according to the hotel regulations, that was prohibited, and even the receptionist had told us that the doors to the pool were closed at 7 p.m. sharp. She told me to ask the person who brought us food in the room if we could go to the pool at that time, not to be gossips or to snitch on that gentleman who was out after hours, but because my boyfriend wanted to swim, and we assumed that the hotel employees knew about this person who was out there in the pool. Well, before closing the doors, they checked the place and make sure to ask him if we could also go out to the pool for a while, to which he replied that he told him that a gentleman who was reading at that time, sitting in one of the chairs, and that the night before we had also seen him there very late. The young man asked us if I allowed him to look out the window. Well, he himself made sure every night before closing the pool that there was no one outside, including that night. We told him that we were in the pool. We gave permission for him to look, but that man was no longer there. He asked us if we were sure that there was someone there. Well, no one could enter after closing the doors that had a security code, and only the hotel employees had that code. We were completely safe, as we already told you. We saw him last night too. We answered him. The young man told us that he would go check and notify reception so they could check the cameras. After that, we better close the doors so we could have dinner at ease. Well, the truth is that it left us very uneasy that the employees didn't know that a man was out there in the pool without even knowing how he had managed to get out. The next day, we were out all day. We came back at around 9 at night, and at the entrance, we ran into the same young man who had brought us dinner the night before. We greeted him, and he asked us, my boyfriend, what had happened to that man at the pool, and this young man made a face like he was worried. He told us that his colleagues had told him what had happened. Well, according to them, that man was the former owner of the hotel who had lost his life in it. They told him that one night some guys came into his room and shot him in the face. According to this, the man owed them a lot of money, and it was no secret that that man was involved in shady business. My boyfriend just laughed when he heard that and asked the employee, laughing, so they told you that that man is a ghost? The young man did not laugh and very seriously answered yes, and that we had not been the only guests who had seen him in the pool. Well, in life, that was his favorite place to be. He asked us not to open the blinds and apologized on behalf of the hotel. Completely stunned, my boyfriend and I returned to our room, although he could not believe it and continued saying that it was pure lies from the employees, an urban legend, or something like that. The truth is that I did feel a little scared, and I listened to this young man about not opening the blinds. The truth is that I was already afraid to look out and see that man. We went to sleep, and at about 4 in the morning, I got up to go to the bathroom, but I heard a very strange noise, as if someone was knocking on our window. When I realized that the noise was coming from outside, I got very scared and woke up my boyfriend. He also heard the knocking on the window and very angrily got out of bed and opened the blinds to look out. And there, outside a few centimeters from our window, was that man. But this time we could see his face, and his face was busted. My boyfriend released the blinds, screaming very loudly, just like I did. We ran out of the room, and the hotel employees heard us and came to ask us what was wrong with us. My girlfriend was very angry and told her what we had seen outside our room. The employees did not know how to react and only apologized to us, but I already knew that it was not their fault. So, I tried to calm my boyfriend down so we could go back into the room, pack our things, and go to another hotel. I don't know how I managed to stay calm. Well, it's that seeing that man in those conditions were the worst trauma I have ever experienced in my entire life. I don't want to describe it even more out of respect for his memory, but it really was something too traumatic to see, especially knowing that that man was no longer even alive. We returned home more traumatized than relaxed. When telling this story to our friends and family, many of them have not believed us. And the truth is, I know it is something difficult to believe. Well, if it hadn't happened to me and someone else told me, maybe I wouldn't believe it either. It is something that, until it happens to you, if you are a skeptical person, maybe you won't believe. But it happened to me, and I know that these things happen more often than we think in hotels and more in the old ones. Well, if you stop to think about it, they have too much history, so many people who have passed through there, leaving their energy, whether good or bad. And now imagine if a crime happened in that hotel in the past. All the people are kept there, reliving those terrible moments. My name is Rafa, and I want to share with all of you this story that happened a few years ago. It happened in a hotel in the Caribbean while I was staying there with my wife, enjoying our summer vacation. Our children gave us the trip, and we were eager to have a good time, have fun, and forget about everyday problems. But unfortunately, that fun was totally interrupted after what I am about to tell you. First of all, I must tell you that the hotel was separated into several rows. That is to say, in front of us, there was a building with rooms of the same hotel. It was our view from the balcony and the large window of our room. That afternoon, we arrived and settled into the place, which was very nice and pleasant. We were staying on the 12th floor. We took a little nap because we were very tired from the trip. Then my wife went in to take a shower to go down to dinner at the hotel restaurant, which was very elegant with a view of the sea. Meanwhile, I decided to go out to the balcony. Although it did not have a view of the sea, I liked to be there, feeling the breeze. I sat in one of the chairs that was out there and just relaxed, watching the surroundings. But suddenly, something caught my attention. There was a girl in front of me on the balcony of the room that was right in front of us. But what caught my attention was that the girl was looking at me in a very fixed way, standing there in the middle of the balcony with her dark room. This young woman had a nightgown that reached her ankles, and I couldn't see her face very well because of the distance, but I could notice that she had no expression on her face. The young woman kept looking at me to the point that I felt very uncomfortable. I tried to be nice and only raised my hand to greet her, and then I looked away because I didn't receive any greeting from her. My wife came out of the shower, and then I went in to shower myself. While she was putting on makeup and getting ready, when leaving the bathroom, I told her what had happened with that young woman, asking her if she hadn't seen her. But my wife replied that no, in fact, she had gone out to the balcony to take photos and send them to our children, but she didn't see anyone in front of her. Without paying any more attention, we went down to dinner and had a good time in that restaurant. We went back up to our room around midnight. My wife was very tired, so she just came home and went to bed to sleep. Since I had had a few drinks, I couldn't fall asleep, so I decided to go out again to sit on the balcony for a while to get sleepy. I couldn't help but first look at that balcony to see if the girl was there. But there was no one, so I relaxed. But then she was there again, standing and watching me. I never understood how it was that she had gone out to the balcony from one second to the next. Well, I had just turned around, and there was absolutely no one, and what caught my attention the most was that the room was always with the lights off. It was in the dark, unlike other rooms. Maybe about 2 minutes passed, and when I noticed that that young woman continued watching me without taking her eyes off, I decided to go into the room and close the curtains. I fell asleep and didn't wake up until the next day. I opened the curtains, and the first thing I did was look out onto that balcony, which was empty. My wife and I got ready, and we spent the whole day out on a tour and didn't get back to the hotel until 10:30 at night. My wife went to take a shower again to go to sleep. I honestly thought twice before going out to the balcony because I was afraid that that strange and somewhat disturbing girl would be there again and watching me again. So I looked for something to watch on TV and instead stayed in bed watching a movie while my wife got out of the shower. After that, I took a shower and went to sleep around 11:40 at night. I woke up suddenly at 2 in the morning. I tried to go back to sleep, but it was impossible, and I had to get up early because the next day a tour company would pick us up very early to take us on another tour. So I got up and made myself some tea that my wife drinks to sleep. Since I couldn't turn on the light so as not to wake her up, I had to open the window again and decided to go out to the balcony to have some tea for real. I wish I had never done it. I sat in that chair again, and the first thing I did was look towards that balcony and make sure that that young woman wasn't standing there again. And no, she wasn't. I started to drink my tea and wait for it to take effect when suddenly that girl appeared again. But this time, for the first time, I saw her move. She was walking towards the balcony with very slow steps. Suddenly, I saw that she leaned on the balcony railing, resting both of her hands on it. And suddenly, she began to lean little by little until she threw herself off. I couldn't even scream. I was totally petrified and horrified, My hands began to shake so much that I threw the cup. My wife woke up and asked me what I was doing on the balcony, whether I wasn't going to sleep or what I was doing. I don't know how long it took me to react and answer her. The young woman threw herself. I told my wife twice with my trembling voice. She asked me, dismayed, how young she was while she walked towards me. I reacted and got up, telling her that we had to call the reception. While I told my wife what I had just seen, they just told me not to worry, that they would be in charge, that I should have a good night, and then they hung up on me. I told my wife, amazed, that if what they were telling me was true. Well, really, I was very surprised at how the receptionist had answered me as if it were nothing serious. Clearly, I couldn't sleep after what had happened. I expected to see sirens from patrol cars or an ambulance arriving at the hotel, but an entire hour went by, and the hotel was still as if nothing had happened, completely calm. I couldn't take it anymore and told my wife that I was going to go down to see what had happened, and she decided to accompany me. But when I got to the reception desk, everyone was as if nothing had happened. Even the bellboys were laughing, watching a video on their phone. I went to the receptionist to ask her what had happened to the girl I reported, and the young woman didn't know how to answer me. So her partner, who was next to her, answered me, telling me, "Sir, everything is fine, no one knows. We already went to check just for safety, but the truth is that this happens very often. People who stay in this hotel building often make reports that they see a girl jump from the balcony in front. But we never found anything." I could not believe what she was telling me. I even got upset, complaining to her that if they were trying to see our faces, if they wanted to hide that an accident had occurred to preserve the reputation of the hotel. But they very kindly tried to calm me down, and that was when the receptionist said, "What you saw happened a few years ago. A young Asian woman who was traveling alone stayed in that room, and one morning she jumped, losing her life instantly. If you want, you can confirm on the internet what I am telling you." My wife ran out and then came in telling me that she had not seen anything on the floor, that if I was sure of what I had seen, I answered yes. The receptionist showed me in her computer that in that room, nobody was staying that night, that in fact, nobody had stayed there for a long time. My wife and I were there listening, trying to understand or at least believe. We went back up to the room, and of course, we couldn't sleep all night. We didn't open those curtains again throughout our stay. We stayed there for 3 days. We had to put up with it because we didn't want to worry our children, and more because we knew the effort they had made to pay for that trip. But nothing was the same after that night. We didn't enjoy our vacation the same, and I was still with the trauma of seeing that girl throw herself and much more, knowing that it wasn't even real or that it was simply a ghost. Years later, we decided to tell this anecdote to our children, who also couldn't believe it, and to this day, we ourselves still can't believe that it was our turn to live that. But it happened, and that has been the only time that I have seen what can be called a ghost, and I hope it doesn't happen to me again.